Hey, this is Andrew Brown from the AWS Cloud Project Bootcamp, bringing you another video. And this time, we're going to take a look at the progress with the validator. I was coding this in the open, but then I spent multiple weeks coding it in private, just because it would have been a lot of videos. It would have been like, oh, I don't know, 30, 40 hours of me coding this, and that's a lot of coding time. So, I just did not do that. But I will walk you through, how this validator works, what is the state of it currently, and, just to give you an idea of like how grading is being performed in terms of those checks, and what happens if you don't meet those checks. So anyway, this is of course open source. At least it's open source for now. It's over here at the Cloud Project Bootcamp Validation Tool. Validators are very difficult to build, or at least they seem to be, not for me, but for other folks. And it has to do with just the way you have to perform the checks and do validation. But anyway, we'll get into it. So up here, we have the examples directory. I'm just here and launching the project up. So I'm going to do a bundle install in the main one. This is all written in Ruby. And I thought about it, and I think I can use Ruby for any. I was talking about porting it to something else. If let's say I used Azure and the SDK didn't support Ruby, but I just remembered I'm not using the SDK. I'm using the CLI, and I'm just shelling out to it. So I can use anything and stick with Ruby, and Ruby really is a good choice of technology because we have the ability to write DSLs, domain-specific languages, and when you're doing validations, that makes that life a lot easier. It's not that you can't write DSLs in other languages, it's just that Ruby is the best at DSLs, and that's one reason why I would use it, not just because it's my favorite language, but it does make it the right choice for this task. So I did bundle install in the main directory. That's for the actual main one. It's actually a gem is the way we created it here. And then the example directory, which is part of the gem, is the way that you can install it. So the idea is that if you wanted to use this to do your own validations, you'd have to write your own validations in the syntax. So you'll see we have validations and validations too, because I was first writing it in one way, and when I got that working end to end, I said, okay, this is too brittle. I'm going to have to make a DSL, and that's what I did, and that's what validations 2 are. So right now, validations, this version still exists, but it will get deleted here at some point. But anyway, coming over to our rake file, this is where we can run our commands. We have our a few tasks here. We have permit, which generates out the permissions. This is not done yet, so it does generate out a YAML file. I haven't ran this in a while, so let's go ahead and run that, see what happens. I got to go to my examples directory, bundle install here, and we'll do a rake permit when this is done installing. Doesn't usually take that long. Give it a moment here to think. There we go. And so if we type in rake permit, that should generate out, oh, right, we need our environment variable file. So here I have this. So we'll go ahead and copy this, and I'll make a new file. Now this tool, like you won't have to run it, but in the student portal, I'll have a button, and it will basically just run this stuff. So I'm just showing you kind of what it, like I wasn't sure if I would have you launch this up and utilize code in order to do it, but I realized that you can't be the one running it because I have to make sure that when it runs that there's no data tampering, and so it has to be done through our student portal, the execution of this, but it's still useful to take a look here. So got me up here, I'm just gonna move these out because these are set in this environment here. But anyway, so the idea is that I would run rake permit here, and that should generate out a cross-account role. This one does rely on a directory already being there, so that is just a defect of the code here, not doing the make dir there. So maybe I can just quickly fix that here. This would be under lib, Cloud Project Bootcamp, validator here. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I haven't touched this code in a while, but go down here below permit runs permissioner. And so if we go in permissioner here, this is adding all the permissions. And then it will attempt to create the file generate, which is the AWS policy. So I'm just going to go here, AWS policy. And we just need to tell it to create the directory if it does not exist. So that's under the generate here. And so we have this path, the output path here. We want to make sure that path just exists before beforehand here. So I've probably done this before somewhere. I'm just going to go over here and say, I mean, this runs in the Polar. So maybe the Polar does this somewhere. Did we have file utils up here? No, I don't see it. But we can just also just, I'm just trying to copy paste the code without having to think here, but I'll just type it in file utils. It's going to have to be done anyway. Just close that back out. And file utils make dirp, I think it is, for Ruby. I think I have this off the top of my head, but just in case I don't. Yeah, file utils, mkdirp, output path. And I only want the file path, so file base name or base path. Get only the directory without file in Ruby. This would be, yeah, dir name, sorry. File dir name. This would be output path. dir path. Let's say dir path. And that way it should create the directory. That could be wrong, but we'll try it anyway. And we'll just play around with the code here for a second. No errors. This is just like an old thing. This is an old warning. But this is supposed to generate this out. We go into our output here. Right, so it'll generate out this file. And so this file I've yet to run because I put all these policies together, but I never really validated them against the Polar to see if these are the correct permissions. But the idea is that in the student portal, you'll press a button. It will generate this out for you with a specific external ID so that it's specifically linked with your AWS account and what we expect in the student portal, your student portal account. And then you need this to be installed in your account before you run the Polar so it has permission to pull the data. So that would be step one of what you'd be doing. But again, this would be explained in the student portal in a more clean fashion there. So that's step one. After that's done, then you'd press a button in the student portal, and that would do basically a rake pull. So rake pull is going to pull the data. We have videos covering how the pulling works. That was pretty well covered before, so we don't have to go through that again here in this video. But all it's doing is downloading a bunch of files, and I sped it up as much as I can. But this stuff would download, and yeah, all these files here will download the contents of it. And so this is why I want you to be running or been doing the project not in a company account, because we could be seeing things we don't want to see. I do try to pare it down as much as I can in terms of certain areas of information. So I try to check based on tags that I expect from CloudFormation or some other things. But yeah, just understand that if you did this project in an account that you cannot share the data with, then we can't do grading here because you have to make sure you're using an account that you can share that data, the contents of it with me. And so this data, it would get uploaded to an S3 bucket in our account. It would sit there for a period of time. I would probably put lifecycle, because I don't want to hold on to people's data. So we would put on lifecycle rules, and it would get deleted in 30 days or whatever S3 lets you do. I just can't remember what the minimum day is. I'm not setting up lifecycle rules very often in S3, but the point is that it would only hang around for a certain period of time, and it would automatically clean itself up. So, but anyway, once that data is pulled, we can validate it any given time. Ideally, it'd be nice if you could press the button and run the validator, but probably what I'll do, especially with some of whoever are the first ones to be graded, is I will be running it manually. So you'll pull the data and you will say, hey, the data's been pulled, go ahead and grade it, Andrew. And then I will go and launch Git pod like this, and I will run it against your account, the validator, and read it and understand what's going on there, and then determine a grade based on that, or come back with questions and say like, hey, this didn't pass. Why didn't this pass? But that's kind of the idea there. But anyway, so that's the Polar. And so I wrote two different validators. Well, not two different, but just I upgraded one from another one. But coming back to the rake file, if we go over here, so we have our permit, we have our pull. And so we have our validate. And validate was the old one. I haven't ran the old one in a while, so I don't know if it's broken, but we can go ahead and run it for fun. And if it fails, I don't care. And it didn't fail. It was actually quite quick. And so here you can see it's returning back JSON data. Now, it doesn't seem that it has ran all of them, so it must have encountered a problem. So what happens is that this will run until, well, maybe there's some code commented out because it's been a while here. So if I go over to validator RB, maybe, yeah, some of these are commented out. So I can put these back in like this, just to show you how the old one worked. And that was the one that I was coding that I was showing you. Yeah, and so this one's running into some errors, which is totally fine. Undefined lambda r, and so I'm not going to go back and fix all this stuff, but the point was it was outputting this, and this is the JSON structure, and it's still using more or less the same JSON structure. But the thing was that the old code here, I'm basically, I have some helper functions, but we're basically just crawling through JSON, which is actually a hash in Ruby, but we're just going through and validating it. And so the thing is that if anything was to fail at any of these steps, we wouldn't know. It's really a pass or a fail at any given point. So I can't pinpoint to say like, why did it fail? I just know that it did. And there's like these subchecks or asserts inside of here. So we want to check this and that. And so if you had a testing framework, you do things like, assert, test, and you'd say, does true equal true, right? And so there are testing frameworks there. And the reason I didn't use a testing framework was because, at least in Ruby, I know that these do not output a JSON structure. They'll output like an XML, not even XML report. They'll output like this weird format. And so you basically have to go and parse it. And sometimes they're not very detailed. And so also they can be really slow. So like RSpec, I really like RSpec, but it can be slow and I can't get it to output in the format that I want. And so even though it's really nice, it's just not going to be easy to use. And again, I don't want to parse stuff. I just want to have it in the format that I want it in. And also, it's a big library, so there's a lot of moving parts there. And I'd rather know exactly what's going on with that. So I took that and I wrote my own DSL. And I guess that could be really interesting, but I'm not going to make 40 hours of videos to teach you how to write DSL. And so I wrote something that's kind of RSpec-y, kind of unit testing here. But the idea is that when we go through here, all like everywhere it says assert, it's asserting all these things. So if it fails here or here or here or here or anywhere where it says assert or expects, I'm going to know exactly where it is. And so it'll be more detailed. And so before here, I was doing these checks to kind of know, but I only did that near the end. And then a lot of these checks don't have these checks, and it was very hard to get them all. So anyway, let's run the new validator, which should work because I was just running it inside. And so this, it's still JSON. It's just that I formatted it. And so here it shows me greater detail what's going on. So if I'm looking at this, this one here, which has some red, this one's for serverless, should have Rev 53 distribution for assets. I'm going to pull this up over here. This is in serverless. This should have Rev 53 here. And I could pull up the outline. That might be a little bit faster. Symbols is not installed. I thought it was. Here we go. And so the idea is that we can kind of crawl through and see what's going on here. So first it loads the data. So that's here. Assert load. You can see that's there. And I'm not printing, like this information is in here, but I'm not printing all of them out. So I do have to make these reports a little bit better or clearer to read. But the idea is that I would see that this loaded and that it attempted to make this selection here. That's what this is here, this first filter. Then it does a return. So here it's doing that. We have the... is that the same one? Should have Rev3 to assets. Yeah, so sorry, assert load. So that's the load data. First filter, that's that one there. Find, there is no find to perform, so I guess it doesn't show anything. And then we have returns. And then we have another load data down below. Should have, oh, you know what? We're on the wrong one. That's why I'm getting confused. Okay, sorry, it's this one we're reading. Sorry. Anyway, so yeah, asserts loads. It does a find, so there's our find. So sorry, so this one's here. This is that one. then this first filter is that it selected that first part of the JSON object, because often these will have that. So if I open this up here, sorry I'm a mess, but this is the video you get of me explaining it. But if we go over here, this would be in our run. This is Route 53, so that is a global service. Route 53 would be list hosted zones. So down below here, we would go here. And so you'll see like, okay, it loads this file, and then it selects this, because often this is how AWS API payloads come in. They're always wrapped in something. So that's why we have the first filter there. And they were saying, find it based on name. So match the naked domain name, which would be creditor.com, period, to that. And then return only the ID. And so the idea is it only returns that value. Okay, and so that value gets returned here as the zone ARN. Here I split it. So this could actually be a place where it could fail, because if this did not return a value or something, this could cause an issue. But if it fails anywhere in here, if this failed the check, then it shouldn't run the rest of that code. And so this error would never happen. And so that's why there's no assert on this or anything special. And the chances of this not returning data that's correct would be very unlikely by AWS, and that's why I don't have an assert there. Then you can see here the load data from this one. So it would load this file here. And it's going to select into the record sets, return all. Return all just means like it will return all of the data. So yeah. And then here we have our assert find. So it will go and say within this file, this is Route 53 record sets. So it says, find the record where it matches for name. So here, the name we want to match our asset domain. So somewhere here, we should have that. Well, we're on Harlan, so that's going to be the wrong Route 53 file here. It's probably this one here. And so it's going to match on this one here, name, and then the A record. And if those both match, then it will return that. We do returns all, just to say all of the data of what's being returned. Okay. This was not the best syntax language, but I'm not going to go back and change it because this all works. And so returns the record here. And then we just assert the JSON and we say this record, we expect it to have a path of alias to DNS name, and we expect that value to equal that, right? And then here, this would be the set fail, set pass message. I don't use that here in the render at all, but they're definitely there. And you know, the more detailed information about like what's failing, which file is in here. I didn't update the script for that. So, and that wouldn't be hard to do. You know, if I go to my rake file here, we could probably make this a little bit more verbose. But yeah, this was just my working validation. I'm actually going to probably generate it as an Excel spreadsheet so that I have like an Excel sheet or something that is easier for me to read. And at some point, you know, this all will get integrated into my major platform. So at some point, the whole course, the whole bootcamp will get moved to Exam Pro, the big LMS, and this will all be integrated. But you know, if you're watching this prior to that, then the process will be different. And if this is the future, then you already know that this is going to be a lot easier. But yeah, over here, you know, just goes through and iterates it. And so for whatever reason, I'm just not rendering that information out here. So I just have to update the script here. But anyway, you know, that's how the validation works. And the idea is that I can pinpoint where the problem is. So like here, it's doing the assert find, right? And it's iterating through each of these. You can see this actually has a lot more data. And it's matching against one and telling you whether they match or not. So like for this, if we go back up to our record here, right? It's iterating through each of these, right? And it's going to the first one. It says the name creditor.com is there. And we're trying to match against that. So therefore, that's why that's red. But this does have an A record. So it goes to the next one, does not match. Next one does not match. Next one does not match. And the next one almost matches. And the fifth one, it does match, and that's what it returns. It doesn't say that it returns it, but you know, we know because it's both green, and that's how we would know. So we go down to the bottom here, or wherever this one is here. And this one didn't run because it didn't have to. It stops at that one. So yeah, hopefully that is pretty clear in terms of how it's working. But yeah, it's no simple task to write your own validation. But it took me like 2 weeks to a week or two to do the first one, and then it took me a whole week to create this DSL. And so it's extremely powerful system, only for AWS right now, but we will get the other ones at some point here when we run other types of boot camps. But yeah, what happens if some of these things fail. Does that mean you're not going to pass? Well, no. It really depends on, what you did in your project, because some people, and I encourage you to do this, was to go and implement something that was not of the original application, right? To go and change something. So some people might have done everything in Terraform. There's one boot camper. They just did everything in Terraform. They didn't touch CloudFormation at all. And so there are checks in here that rely on CloudFormation, right? And so if you didn't use CloudFormation, it wouldn't know the CloudFormation stack is there, can't perform it. And so that's where we have a manual intervention, and I will actually have to, manually grade it. And so, I can't manually grade everybody, but I mean, I think there's not that many boot campers that mangled or did something different. So, and again, like for Red Squad people, if there's, we haven't determined at this point, like how many Red Squads we're going to have, but like if there's only 20, then, and I had to manually grade 20 people to get in the Red Squad, I don't mind that. Like whatever the number is. So, just don't sweat it if some things fail, or, I might come back to you and say, hey, can you go ahead and tell me what's going on here? Or if I can make sense of it in your code base, in your journaling, then it will be not so much of an issue, right? So just don't worry about that. And probably before you even get it, because especially for those who are grading the earliest, that I'll definitely be providing context in terms of like how I did, like how I interpreted the grading. Not necessarily just saying like it's pass or fail, but that kind of information. But in the future, again, I can't manually grade everybody in that level of detail. So again, if you're years in the future here, just understand that process might look different from when I'm talking about this now. But again, I just wanted to show you how this worked, and it could be very interesting to understand how this works, but again, out of the scope of the project. In terms of what data is being inputted, there are some values that there was no way to get around it. You have to just input them. And so in this validation tool, I have, they're called specific parameters. And these specific parameters are things that you have to provide. You have to provide the domain name, the naked domain name, or the root domain name, the apex domain name, whatever you want to call it. Your cluster name. So that was one where there was no way around it. You had to provide me the cluster name of your ECS cluster. The backend family, that was another one that there was no way around it. And then the raw asset bucket. And this just has to do with how the data is for the AWS API, where, I'm trying to select through different things and do stuff like that. But, those ones, there was no way around it. And if we weren't using CloudFormation, I would have been asking for a lot of stuff, right? So like if and when we do the Terraform bootcamp in the future and we're using the same infrastructure, I can't check your Terraform stack in the same way that I can check CloudFormation. And so I'll have to update those rules, and I'll probably be asking for more specific values here. That or you had to be a lot more strict about the names. But I made it as flexible as I could. And so these values will have to get provided, and that will be in the form in the student portal. But you can see them reflected over here. Specific parameters. So you can see these are all the things that I'm going to be asking for or expecting. Cognito user pool, we don't see it here. Oh, this is for the polar. So the polar and the validator have slightly different ones. Sorry. So there actually are more values. There's the API gateway, Cognito user pool, your GitHub repo name. So yeah, there's a bit more, but this is the stuff that I would need to be like, you don't provide. Well, I guess you do the user ID, but I infer it from this is your ID in your student portal account. But yeah, I would have to know what region you're primarily running stuff in, the naked domain, your full GitHub repo name, the cluster, the backend family, and these should this should be the same. This should be the same, but if for whatever reason you named it slightly different, I'm just giving you that flexibility to fix it. But there are things that I do expect to be named a certain way. Like I do expect the CloudFormation templates to be exactly what I named them for them to work. And I could provide parameters, but we'd be providing parameters here all day. I didn't do that. So like, for example, if we go into IAC, these are the names I'm expecting of your CloudFormation stacks. If they're not named that, we're going to have some issues. And I don't know how widespread it is. If I find out the majority of students name them differently, I'm going to have to go back and fix this validator. If it's just a few of you, then you're the odd ones out. You're going to have to go tear down those stacks and rename them, or you know, maybe there's manual intervention. I don't know. But I do know that these are hard coded here. For some here, I infer, like here, you know, you provide the cluster name, but I actually inferred it through this. So here I said, go find me your CloudFormation stack, this for CrowdStrike cluster, and go grab me the cluster name, right? So for this check, I was able to infer it, but in another part of the code, I didn't do that check. I did it differently for whatever reason. But yeah, so CloudFormation, I'm again relying in this project for that information. Yeah, and so this would have been a lot harder if we didn't do that without the CloudFormation. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the validator in terms of how fast feedback will get to you. I don't know, but all I know is that I want to gather data from boot campers, and for some early ones, whoever has been done, like the first 20 or 15 or 30 are done, you'll be getting feedback pretty fast because I'll be trying to get this system all worked out here. But hopefully that gives you an idea of this super powerful tool. And yeah, this is what a validator looks like. But yeah, if you're looking at the code base, this is going to get reworked here. It'll just be validations. All these ones are going to get blasted away. They're just old, and they're good as a prototype to iterate on. But there's that there. But yeah, so we're almost there with the validator. But yeah, hopefully that gave you some information, and I will see you in the next one. Ciao.